All right, I think we're rolling. Good deal.
All right.
All right, I got to refer to my notes. You don't ever use notes,
That's
do you?
well, again, it probably primarily the stuff that we do discuss. It's kind of like what we were doing beforehand.
Yeah,
Like I just kind of pull from conversation
just
that we
riff a
had.
little bit. Yeah, yeah.
I make sure to listen to the stuff beforehand. Maybe glance at their Instagram,
Mhm.
kind of see what they've been working on.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let me introduce you, Josh Gillespie. Thanks for joining me on Bands on the Radar. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, Darren. Thank
Y-
you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we connected maybe a month ago or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was we finally got together. We have similar interests.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought it was probably good to reach out to you and kind of
I'm glad you
see
did.
how things are going.
Yeah. I think you're much more busy with your interests than I am with mine. That's one thing. As I've started following you and gotten to know you,
Mhm.
I even made it in my notes here. You're like a Renaissance man. I mean,
Oh wow,
you've
thank
got
you.
so many irons in the fire, and I had to make a list here. You're on all the socials.
Mhm.
You have an excellent podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're in a band.
I am.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you're out actively playing shows
Most of the time solo, but
solo.
yes, yeah, we have a full band gig coming up at the Melody Inn here soon.
Yeah, nice, nice. Releasing music and making more music.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, got.
and yeah, and then not the least of which, then you have a day job.
I do,
Yeah,
and I'm a father.
and of 4,
5.
5.
Yeah.
Ooh, don't want a shortcut there.
No.
So, 5. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. You are a busy guy.
Okay.
I'm thinking, man, I really, I started, as I said, I started following you and watching all the things you're doing. I'm like, how do you pack it all in? And then you found time to join me tonight. So,
Well, fortunately, it's a Friday and it's spring break.
yeah. Okay. Well, that helps. That helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's dig into your history a little
Yeah,
bit.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely. Would love
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. So Indianapolis is home now,
Yes, it is.
and or the metro area.
Mhm.
Is it? Are you in Fishers?
I used to live in Fishers. Now
Okay.
I'm in downtown.
Oh, okay. Okay. Has it always been home for you?
Indiana, and specifically the Indianapolis, the area has been, yeah, pretty much
Yeah.
for the vast majority of my life.
Mhm.
I lived a couple years out in DC. That's actually where I met my wife,
Yeah. Okay.
and we moved back here shortly after we got married. Actually, almost immediately after we got married.
Is that right?
Hmm.
Okay. And you were in DC how long?
Just for a couple of years,
Couple of
but
years.
it was a pretty memorable time. 2 weeks after I started, September 11th happened.
Mm.
Um, so I don't remember what DC was like without barricades,
Oh
like
yeah.
lots and lots of barricades,
Yeah.
and apparently they have even more now these days.
Wow.
But that's quite a memory to have your
Yeah.
first couple weeks on the job.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. All right. And tell me, when did music become so prominent in your life? When at early age?
Sure.
What's
Now
your
it
earliest
was
memory?
my earliest memory is actually my brother playing the drums
Mm.
in our garage
Okay.
when we lived in Fishers, and he's been actively playing drums. He's 10 years older than me, so
Okay.
he's been playing drums since I was in elementary school.
Okay.
And my earliest memory was of him out there playing, and the constant, kind of teenager parent battle over music.
Mhm.
And my brother was really into rock and roll. My sister was into the pop of the 80s, and my
Okay.
parents were very classic and jazz. And so, it's kind of like I'm looking at all of the smorgasbord of music that's kind of at my fingertips.
Mhm.
And my parents were definitely not keen on my brother's kind of music, which I think made it all that more
Yeah,
attractive.
you gotta like that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, it did. It did. And as he got older, as I got older, and he went off to college and eventually got married himself, he actually started making me mixtapes.
Oh, okay.
And he called them like History of Rock and Roll. And so it had, Zeppelin and
Nice.
Aerosmith,
Yeah.
lots of like true like rock.
Mhm.
And I ate those tapes up.
Mm.
And so when I was in middle school, I would listen to those tapes all the time
Mhm.
whenever I would be mowing the lawn
Mhm.
or eventually when I learned how to drive.
Yeah.
Pop those in the tape deck because that's
That's what you had
that's
then.
what I had. Actually, the very first car I had is very much similar to modern cars these days in that it had nothing but a radio,
Okay.
which is kind of funny. A Ford Escort station wagon from 1987, no AC, and it had no CD player because that wasn't a thing at the time.
Right.
No tape deck, so I actually had to install a tape deck.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but yeah, I ate those tapes up, and he made me, four over the years,
Yeah.
and I started developing my own taste in music. Now, mind you, I had started playing band in elementary school, so my
Okay.
first instrument that I started to learn was the piano. I think that's pretty much the way it is for a lot of kids who get involved in music.
Yeah.
Their first instrument is piano.
Mhm.
Um, but my first like orchestral instrument, like the beyond the piano, was trumpet,
Mm.
and I played trumpet from elementary school all the way through high school, and I actually did not pick up the guitar until after I graduated high school.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. So were you self-taught on guitar?
For the most part, I am.
Yeah.
I've taken lessons a couple of times,
Okay.
and I would probably be a lot farther along if I had paid more attention during those lessons. I consider myself a pretty good rhythm guitar player, but
Mhm.
there's no lead going on here. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not
No.
I'm not good with scales.
Yeah.
Someone talks about root notes or anything like that, and
Yeah.
I'm just going to give you a blank face.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm self-taught as well, so I understand the limitation there.
Mhm.
Although there are several great self-taught players that
Oh,
can
yes.
tear it up, but
Yeah.
but I'm more of a rhythm player myself, so
All right.
I live
Excellent.
in that camp. I'm there
Yeah.
with you. So out of that, so Zeppelin, Aerosmith, did they have the most those rock bands? Did it have the earliest pronounced influence on you, or did
No,
jazz creep in there? Or
actually, the main band that I didn't even mention was Rush.
oh yeah,
They were my brother's favorite band at the time.
okay,
And as a drummer, I mean, he, really looked up to Neil Peart, the
mm,
drummer of Rush. And so I remember all of those songs. Like, so amongst all the history tapes that my brother made for
mm,
me, he made me one tape of just Rush.
mm,
And I remember listening to that thing over and over again.
yeah,
And I started to get an appreciation for Rush themselves. And so, probably from a younger age, they were the ones that I kind of glommed onto.
mhm,
It wasn't actually until high school that I really started appreciating the likes of Led Zeppelin,
mm,
and some of the more classic rock, the Aerosmith. I
mhm,
really got into Aerosmith, and in the '90s. I loved Get a Grip,
mhm.
which was the one that had the triumvirate of Crazy Amazing, and I forget what the other one, but they all sounded the same. Um, and then, of course, "Living on the Edge," which
Mm,
was an awesome song.
mhm,
It came out after Pump. Came out before Permanent Vacation. There were two big ones from the '80s,
mhm,
late '80s, and it was. I mean, I can say that I've seen like a lot of these bands that my brother turned me on to at a young age. Fortunately, like in concert.
mhm.
So, I saw Rush about 3 or 4 times before they retired. Actually, my son's very first rock and roll show was a Rush concert
Nice. Good
at 5
job,
years
Dad.
old.
Good job, Dad.
Thank you. Um, and I saw Page and Plant when they were on
Mm,
tour in
I
the
missed that one.
'90s.
I missed that.
That was a great show.
Mm,
And I know I've seen Aerosmith. Um, but the one band, and they were that was featured on Volume 2 of my history lesson, actually was REM, which was sort of a newer band. Well, I wouldn't say newer band at the time, but it was a newer song of
mhm,
theirs.
mhm,
And when it was the song "Losing My Religion,"
mm,
which I mean, that's the one that everybody seems to know. If it's not Everybody Hurts,
yeah.
it's "Losing My Religion," and probably the one that's received some of the most airplay of any REM song. And I can still listen to that song without a problem, without it getting old. And I remember when I heard it for the very first time, it was actually my sister's wedding. And I had, the
Mhm,
headphones on, tape deck rolling, and sitting on the edge of a table suffering from poison ivy. After the wedding rehearsal had finished, and all of a sudden I hear the strum pattern of Peter Buck's mandolin,
Mm-hmm.
and that snare hit from Bill Berry, and I was just warped
Yeah.
into another world. And it was at that moment that it was like I felt like my eyes were opened.
Hmm.
You know, it was an ethereal feeling of being alive and discovering something at the same time.
Wow.
And probably from that point on, REM was my all-time favorite band.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, I have every single album of theirs. I'm a long-time fan. Never got to see them in concert.
Yeah, I never got to see him either. And it's so funny that you say that about losing my religion. I think I've actually said that to my wife before. I never have ever gotten tired of hearing that song.
Yeah.
Never. And it's funny that you say that. I feel the same way about it.
Well, you know, there are some songs that will come out from bands, and you're just like, I am so tired of hearing this song.
For sure.
And I'm sure that for many out there, that song is like that for them.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when it came out in 1990, 91, and it was probably all over the radio, but not the radio that I was listening to.
Yeah.
So I had never heard it before until my brother had put it on the mixtape.
Mm.
And
wow.
I mean, with all the bands that, you know, were put on there from The Who and the Guess Who and Kansas and Heart, Boston, other bands that I honestly can't even remember the names of anymore. I mean, even Pearl Jam Alive made it onto an album, onto a mixtape, and I definitely resonated musically, maybe not lyrically so much, but musically with the music of the grunge movement.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, you know, little old REM with their mandolins and acoustic guitars and string sections won me over.
Yeah, yeah. They had a span there of albums that were just A+, A+,
Oh, yeah.
A+. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Early band experience for you. So you didn't pick up the guitar till you were, did you say in college, out of college?
It was the summer between my senior year in high school and freshman year in college.
Okay.
That's when I picked it up.
So did you hop into a band at that point? Were you just playing in your room?
I was just playing in my room at the time.
Okay.
And actually, I mean, truth be told, the guitar that I bought after high school sat in the corner for 6 months because not the blisters, but the calluses hurt.
Yeah, they hurt.
And I was like, man, this is just for the birds.
Yeah.
And eventually I thought to myself, I spent a good deal of money on this guitar.
What kind was it? You remember?
It was a Fender but a Fender D20, I think. At the time, it's kind of one of their lower end guitars now, but at the time it was probably mid range.
Yeah.
And because that was like a $600 guitar at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was red. Is red. I still have it.
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah.
Good.
It's
good.
She is my muse. And I still have that guitar. I love that guitar. Almost looks as good as the day I bought it. It's seen things. It's been through things, and I have cleaned it up and taken it to repair shops. And I'm sure they're looking at me like, "Why are you getting this thing fixed?" But I love that guitar.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it sat in the corner for 6 months, and I finally decided I need to learn how to play this thing.
Yeah.
And so I took lessons at IRC Music in Castleton
Sure.
when they were still there.
Yeah.
And I took them, it was sometime, you know, probably the second semester of my freshman year in college. I can't remember how long I was actually taking lessons, but I loved that guitar. And so I know a lot of the times after I stopped taking lessons, I just wanted to learn songs that I knew, or familiar with.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was trying to dive into Zeppelin, and that was a mistake.
Yes.
It's diving into them first.
Yeah.
That if you do that, that's probably enough to turn anybody away from learning how to play the guitar. Because
especially when they don't tell you that, he's tuned his guitar differently sometimes.
Tell me about it. Like the entire Zeppelin 3 album is recorded like a half step down.
Yeah.
At least I think it is. I'm not entirely sure because I remember trying to play Tangerine.
Yeah.
to Zep 3, and I was like, I'm in tune here, but I'm not. It doesn't sound like the album. What's going on?
Yeah.
And it was a mess.
Yeah.
So I finally was like, okay, I'm still going to keep with this, but I'm going to put the Zeppelin book to the side.
Yeah. You persevered, though.
I persevered.
Yeah.
I learned newer things, things that I enjoyed playing, and that's just. And in fact, there was a time when I even gave guitar lessons.
Oh, really?
And my method was to learn songs to teach the song that someone wanted to learn, because I felt like if you have an investment in a particular song, that means you'll want to learn how to play it.
True. Yeah.
And so that's how I approached it, and because that's how I learned.
Yeah. Cool. So, what was your first band? Do you remember?
My first band was a band called In the Stillness. It was in college, and
where'd you go to college?
I went to Purdue.
Okay. Oh, that's right. We did.
Yes,
I remember
I'm a
that.
boiler.
That's right. Yeah.
And side note, my brother went to Ball State. And it was me and two other people, and I switched between acoustic guitar and hand percussion.
Okay.
And it was a Christian band at the time. And a lot of the songs that we played were ones that my roommate and I would call the lead guitar player that he wrote. I mean, there were a couple that we did together. There was even one that I wrote, but I look back on it now and I'm like, that should just stay in history. That doesn't need to ever see the light of day again. But actually, one of those songs that came out of that band is going to be appearing on my upcoming album.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
but that was honestly the first and only band that I was in, outside of like playing at church and stuff like that. But never really kind of got into into playing in bands because I had a job.
Right.
I just didn't have the time for it,
Right. Yeah. Well, how do you do it now? You're so
Well,
busy now.
I have a very forgiving job, is what I do.
Okay.
A very allowing job, I should say.
Yeah.
So they're very supportive.
Okay. Good. Well, let's dig into the music a little more
Yeah.
on your music. Tell me about how you would define or describe your genre.
Sure. That's always been a tough one for me, because I feel like it pulls from so many different places, and I like heavy guitar driven rock. Like I said, I really resonated with a lot of the grunge sound, the alternative sound of the 90s. But I realized that wasn't necessarily what I would produce myself. I consider myself an alternative singer-songwriter.
Okay.
So, or a better way to put it is like if Simon and Garfunkel met the Foo Fighters. And so
I love that.
Thank you.
I love that.
Thank you. So I'll have some acoustic sensibilities, and I'll have some of that more heavy guitar driven rock sensibility, all on the same album.
Right.
And you definitely heard that on my first album, Make Something Happen Here, where it was that, and you can hear the influences there as well.
For sure.
Lyrically, I was pulling from. It's hard not to pull from Rush. Sonically, I was pulling from the Foo Fighters and probably unintentionally Alice in Chains, and even stylistically pulling from REM. As well.
Heard some REM in there.
Yeah, as well as some kind of more folkish bands that had a heavy influence on me in the late 90s. And so that's when I finally put together my album. That's what came out musically. And for me, the music always comes first. The lyrics come second.
Okay.
And so musically, this is what was coming out. And so the one where I feel like I am a shameless ripoff artist is actually the song "Remains of Time," which is the 7th track on the album,
Mm-hmm.
one that I released as a single, but one that was co-written with my producer and cousin, John Gillespie. It was actually a conversation that he had with his then 5-year-old daughter, and she asked him, "What is time made of?"
Oh, wow.
And
Oh,
just
wow.
kind of like these, you know, the kind
Yeah.
of questions that kids come up with that when you hear them as an adult, you're like, "Wow,
That's
that's
profound.
profound." I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I was recording my first album, I actually went into the studio with no lyrics, just music.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And so I had like 3 or 4 songs that I had laid down tracks for. And my cousin said, "Hey, I have this song, if you want to use it, maybe it can work with one of the,
Mm-hmm.
one of the songs that you've already written."
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying that out, and I was like, "This isn't working." And so it got its own tune, like separate from what I had been working on, and it actually came fairly quickly. I had the song probably pretty much done within a day or two, and I had to learn. I taught myself bass for this album,
Okay.
so I play guitar and bass and sing and write. My brother played the drums on the album,
Okay.
and another gentleman. Who's sadly right now, the name escapes me. It's Tim something.
Mm.
It's terrible. I can't remember his name. But he played lead guitar,
Okay.
and so it was mostly self-contained.
Mm-hmm.
But for that bass line for the beginning of Remains of Time, I was really kind of feeling like the song Cuyahoga, which is off of REM's album Life's Rich Pageant,
Okay.
which was recorded in Bloomington.
Is that right?
So there's still an Indiana connection.
Okay. I like it. I like it.
And actually by John Mellencamp's producer.
Okay.
And so I mean, it doesn't sound exactly the same,
Mm-hmm.
but there's the song Cuyahoga comes in with like this do 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 like beginning of the song,
Mm-hmm.
and Remains of Time has a similar
Okay.
kind of baseline intro that also pulls a little bit from REM's even their later stuff, with kind of like a xylophone kind of thing going,
Okay.
which is something that you hear more on their later stuff that once their drummer Bill Berry retired, and they started figuring out, okay, how's our sound going to be?
Mm-hmm.
And it was very experimental. So it kind of pulls from 2 different eras of REM for one song.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Yeah. So that came out in 2021.
Officially, officially it was. I finished it in December of 2020. I started releasing singles in January of 2021.
Okay.
It was officially released to the world via Bandcamp in May of 2021, but not everyone's going to Bandcamp.
Right.
So then
I
it
love
was.
Bandcamp.
I know
I love it.
Bandcamp's great, and you got my album off Bandcamp.
I
Thank you
did.
very
I
much.
did. Yeah.
But then I released it for streaming everywhere
Okay.
in December of 2021.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had released like 6 singles, and then I just dropped the album.
Okay. Where did the title come from?
I love that you ask that. There's actually this. I had been sitting on a title for the album. I didn't want to call it "Maybe It's Time" because that seemed too easy. It's like it's the first track on the album. I mean, what? That's my debut album. Well, I'm just gonna call it the first. It seems so unoriginal. But the concept behind the album was what I call my political deconstruction, or my divorce from politics, because my background is in politics. And so I remember this was after we had moved, and I was on my way home from a jog, and I passed this light pole that's actually outside of my oldest 2. They go to Heron High School.
Okay.
And so there was this lamppost outside of Heron High School, and I'm jogging down, and I just see someone had scribbled on there, "Make something happen here."
Nice.
And I was like, it just struck me. It's like
Yeah.
that's what I feel like the message is of the album. So nowhere on the album does that phrasing appear. But to me, that was to me the album itself is sort of a call to action. Maybe It's Time is a call to action, a call to action song. But the entire album was kind of I kind of saw it as a sort of a call to action because it was post-pandemic. Well, it was written mostly during the pandemic. It had, like I said, there was a lot of political deconstructing going on in that album, and so it felt like when I say make something happen here, that can mean writ large. That can be me personally.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I snapped a picture of that thing and did a little photo editing, made it my album cover, and also the name of the album.
Yeah. Okay.
And to me, that just summed up everything
Yeah.
that I was trying to say. It was like, make something happen here.
Yeah. I love the title.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you've touched on this. Other themes that are kind of foundational for the album?
Well, yeah. So the way I kind of approached it, it wasn't intentionally a concept album, but it kind of became a concept album the more I thought about it. And it was meant to be, if this is kind of probably the worst way to describe an album, if it's like a thesis paper, a college thesis, it's like Maybe It's Time is the introduction. This is where I'm making my thesis statement, and that things need to change. The world's kind of messed up right now on many fronts, and we need to do something about that. Maybe it's time we did something about that. And then each song kind of works its way through different issues, kind of making the argument for it. And the conclusion first starts with the song Pinotia, which is an instrumental, which leads into the final song. Thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you. That I really liked. That one was a lot of fun to put together.
Yeah, I made a note on that one that I felt like, and you referenced some of the sounds you were going for. I heard a little bit of like early David Crosby.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's just when I was listening to it. Yeah, that was my
you.
frame of reference when he released his first solo EP or record. It was If I Could Only Remember My Name. Just lots of great acoustic on there, and it took me back to that album.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I did a songwriters in the round at Moondrops Distillery in Fortville back in February, and afterwards, one of the people talked to me and she said, "You reminded me a lot of America, the band America, just from the way that the songs were formed and how I was singing them."
Yeah.
And mind you, I was pulling from a couple of different albums at the time for that, but. Still, a lot of the main ones were from Make Something Happen Here. And so, yeah, Pinotia is kind of like the instrumental, here is my final case. And Pinotia is meant to... So Pinotia itself is... and I
had to look it up.
Yeah, this is where I start nerding out. Really, if you think a college paper, a term paper is a terrible way to describe a record, this is going to be even worse. Pinotia is one of the 7 supercontinents, and if anyone is ever thinking about supercontinents at all, they're thinking of maybe Pangea.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the known one, and they probably think that's probably the only one. No, there were 7. And Pinotia, when I was looking through the list of supercontinents, Pinocia's like, I've never heard of that one. I've heard of the others. Even in passing, I've heard of the others, but I've never heard of this one, so I'm going with that one.
I'm going to give it some love.
And so it's supposed to evoke groaning and straining, and so there are supposed to be sounds of groaning in that song. Like the whole album has been, we've been going through, whether it's political strife, emotional strife, societal strife, all these things. It's the groaning, the birth pangs of creation and formation that are supposed to be evoked in that particular song, and then "Sing for the Day" is just kind of like the release, the like, it's the hope.
Okay.
And I mean, I touch on a lot of different things in that album. The Remains of Time is probably the one that sticks out just because it wasn't like lyrically, it wasn't written by me. But still there is that connective tissue because I wanted the album to be about everything that I talked about, but also hit on family, and even faith in some way, but the struggles with that, especially in light of the pandemic. And so a lot of that all of that plays out with, again, at the end, the final song kind of being like a song of hope.
Okay. Did you write the songs for the album, or were they just in a catalog that you had?
I wrote them for the album.
You wrote them for the album.
So I honestly, I again, songs like the tunes come first for me. But for the longest time, lyrics would not, like ever. So there are two songs on the album, like tunes on the album, that are 15 and 16 years old when I recorded them. India Blue, which is the first instrumental.
Right.
That kind of seemed like that seemed like a bridge to me. Like if you're listening to that was the end of side one. India Blue is the end of side one, and then you always got to come in with a punch in the face when you flip that record over and start side two, and that's where you get Slave to the Party.
And it's a rocker.
It is a rocker.
It is a rocker.
But India Blue was an instrumental that I wrote that I never felt like it was ever gonna have words, and Another Story, which went through many mental iterations before it landed on what it's about, was probably actually one of the first songs that I wrote after I got married. So tune-wise.
Okay.
But lyrically, it did not get its purpose until all the songs were written between 2019, like probably September of 2019 to July of 2021.
Okay.
Or 2020, excuse me.
Okay. And India Blue, you said was an older song, but was that a new recording though?
That was.
Yeah.
It absolutely was a new recording, yes.
Okay.
Everything was a brand new recording.
Yeah.
There are no holdovers.
Yeah. Okay.
So
there's a lot of texture and nuance in the record, just stuff happening in the background I really like, some instrumental effects that I like. The other thing I was noticing today on Spotify, the videos that play in the background.
Yeah.
I don't know where you pulled those from, but they're excellent. They fit the songs, which I guess ideally they should.
They should, yeah.
But I mean, they really fit the songs.
Thank you.
I wish they could be longer.
Longer than the 7 seconds.
Yeah, they loop kind of quick. But so for the listeners, I would definitely recommend buy the record.
Thank you.
But then buy the record. But then you can get on Spotify and check it out.
Absolutely, whether you buy it or whether you listen to it. Obviously, I prefer you buy. But if you just happen to listen to it, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah. So did you pick those videos, I'm assuming?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I worked them a bit. They're the royalty-free things.
Okay.
And I worked them over a bit in Canva and through a couple of other platforms before I inserted them as canvases. I believe that's what they're called.
Okay. I've used Canva, but I've never delved into that part, I guess. So
I think that the Canva part was mostly to help me make sure that I got the proper dimensions.
Okay. Yeah.
So
personal favorites right now of mine from the record, "Wake Up Dead Man," and I know that's getting a lot of
getting a lot of attention lately.
Yeah, it is. I think I even heard you say that somewhere in Asia or Australia, somebody had streamed it from Australia.
Yeah, well, and it was. I just found out this morning that it got put on a playlist in Finland.
Really?
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
It blows my mind too.
Yeah, which is great.
No, I'm loving it.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm loving it.
"Souvenirs of War," I really like.
Thank you.
I like them all, but and Another Story. I love the trippy guitar.
Oh, thank you.
On that record.
That was definitely all Tim's work there. Yeah. He did just a fantastic job, and I'm mentally kicking myself for forgetting his last name.
I think it's on the. I think I saw the name
It's
on
on.
Bandcamp, right? Where you
Yes,
list the.
I do, and it's actually on the physical copy of the album. His name is on there.
Okay. Okay.
And but yes, it is on Bandcamp.
Okay.
I want to make sure that those who play on my album get the recognition
Right.
that they deserve.
Right. Sure.
So yeah, Tim did some great work on that. I said that I was looking for something a little bluesy.
Mm-hmm.
The song is meant to be a kind of song that leads you down a path of um I'll be pretty straightforward with it. Usually, typically, I like to let people give me their opinions on what they think the song is about.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been pretty open about what Another Story is about. It's about gaslighting. So I wanted that kind of trippy, jazzy guitar that would lead you to be like, "What am I hearing?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is like, yeah, it just kind of takes you on a bit of a journey.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love that. I don't know why I've always been drawn to that trippy, ethereal kind of sound.
Yeah.
And it has that. So yeah, kudos. Yeah. What personal favorites for you, if I could even ask, or ones that you enjoy playing live when you're out?
Sure.
Yeah.
I really enjoy. It's easy to say all of them. But ones that I enjoy playing, I think that I would enjoy playing. I enjoy playing like Souvenirs of War with the band,
Mm-hmm.
even though it takes on a entirely different sound
Mm-hmm.
when it's played with the band than it does on the album, because the album version has strings,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't play with strings. With this, I don't carry a string section with me.
Not in the budget,
right? It's definitely not in the budget.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed playing Wake Up Dead Man lately, acoustically and with the band. Like I said, we have a gig coming up May 7th at the Melody Inn in Indianapolis, and we've been playing that in practice. So it's on the set list. Spoiler. And the work that my lead guitarist Carl Hartman is doing right now, he muscles his way in with a is it okay to say balls to the wall?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
A balls to the wall of sound type, get out of my way, lead singer, this is my turn kind of guitar solo.
Okay.
And he does an amazing job.
Yeah.
I mean, he just nails it. So that's a lot of fun. I enjoy playing Maybe It's Time, whether it's acoustically or with the band. Maybe It's Time has actually become like our warm-up song. We know that one so well. And we haven't actually as a band, we haven't played like the latter half of the album too much.
Okay.
I can't see playing, tracks like India Blue or Pinotia live, although I would love to. India Blue is just me and strings. I have always enjoyed playing that song, even without any accompaniment. I really enjoy that song.
I heard you say, I think when I tuned into one of your live Instagram feeds the other day, that you've got two versions of Wake Up Dead Man?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my wife actually helped. So as I was putting, like when I would do the final touches of a song, I would always run it by my wife first, who is definitely much more of a wordsmith than I am. Now, she's not a lyricist, but I mean, she's a writer and has a good command of writing in general. So I would run my songs by her. And the first version that I had with Wake Up Dead Man that even has, like, there is out there in the ether, my personal ether, no one has it, a recorded version of the alternate version of Wake Up Dead Man.
Okay.
So Wake Up Dead Man, to me, like the inspiration behind it, it was originally called, and again, this was when it didn't have lyrics. So I would sometimes songs that didn't have lyrics would still get names because I had an idea of what I thought it might be about. And I had called this one The Bureau because to me it was going to be about it was going to be about the government and not secrecy, but just like the red tape, just the the hardness of, and my nephew had painted, actually not even painted, he had done it in crayon. He's an artist, and he had done this piece of work called The Bureau, and I was like, well, this is perfect. And essentially it was of, you see this person at a desk just writing stuff down and passing it to someone behind him, and it keeps on going up, 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 up this staircase. Only at the end of the staircase, it gets dropped off a cliff.
Oh.
And to me, that was like, that's a perfect symbolism of government.
Yeah.
And so it was going to be called The Bureau. And I had given my brother the tracks to the songs. I think only one may have actually had lyrics put to it. And so when he recorded his drum parts, The Bureau did not have lyrics, but I told him, just do whatever you want to do with the songs, or I trust you, and we'll kind of go from there. And when I first heard what he did, I was like, oh, this song's about something else.
Interesting.
And I started singing the line "Wake Up Dead Man" to it, which is actually also the name of a U2 song off of their album Pop.
Okay.
It's the very last track, I believe.
Okay.
But I just started singing that, like, to the chorus. I was like, "Wake up, dead man." I was like, okay, I have a song. It's called "Wake Up, Dead Man." And the imagery that I was thinking of was, I was thinking of all the police brutality that was in the news at the time, and a lot that had occurred because of that. And so a lot of that, I was weaving in a lot of that imagery into the song. And my wife said, I know what you're going for, but I think we need to try something else. And so she went with, there is an Old Testament story of the dry bones in the desert coming to life. It's a vision that one of the prophets have. And it was, that played into it. Like, she took some of the ideas that I was trying to get across in the original song, and she helped me come up with more descriptive concepts.
Okay.
So it completely changed the song. And so what we ended up with, it still has the meaning is still the same to me, but it takes on more of that reference to rising up out of the ashes, and being made alive again. So it's kind of more of a phoenix figure, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Great. I love knowing all that backstory. I know as an artist, sometimes, as you said, you want the listener to figure it out, or let it be what it will be to them. But
yes,
it's always nice to get a little of the behind the scenes as to what was going on.
Yeah, I've become more open about it. Originally, I would be very coy about certain things, and that was very intentional. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is what, I mean, I want to know what people think when they hear these songs. I would love to hear their opinions, and what they think that they hear. But this is what the song's about.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, let's transition to your live performance.
Yeah.
You're very active on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. How do you find those platforms? Do you enjoy working on those platforms? I assume you do, or you wouldn't be doing it. But talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Admittedly, the idea is not mine. It was stolen. There is an artist, a singer-songwriter by the name of Derek Webb, who's one of my all-time favorite musicians. Okay. His goal in life is to have as few fans as possible. He presses on the nerve quite a bit.
Okay.
And I don't know, there's something about that I like about him.
Okay.
And I don't always agree with the stuff that he's writing, but I can appreciate where he's coming from. Yeah. Anyway, so he does these things called 2 for Tuesdays. Or, well, it used to be 2 and 2 on Tuesday.
Okay.
And then I started after he moved him to Wednesdays, I forget what he calls it now. It's like 2 and 2 on Wednesday. I started doing 2 for 2 on Tuesday.
Okay.
And he would do it during the day. I'd do it during the evening. And eventually I switched over because I was getting nobody watching those early days. And I was like, I sort of reformatted it. I called it, I thought I would do it during the day instead, since, that seems to work for him. Maybe it'll work for me. And he knows I do this. I'm actually one of his patrons. I have a monthly, Patreon call with him and other people who are in the same tier. So he knows what I'm doing. And I told him, I was like, I've totally ripped off your idea. He's like, dude, do it. It's like, whatever works. And yeah, so I live stream every Thursday at 12:30. I call it Let's Break for Lunch. I play 2 of my songs, and that can span my first album to the album that I'm recording to the album that I'm working on writing. And I try not to play stuff from the third album. I reference the third album quite a bit. But it's not out yet, nor has it even remotely been recorded. I have scratch tracks that I've done, but they're for the band. But I try to make sure that my patrons hear the new songs first before I play them on Let's Break for Lunch. Just because, it's like I feel like I'm doing this to build fans. I'm doing this to build community, and I want to reward them. And if you want to check out my Patreon, it's patreon.com/Josh Gillespie Music. There
you go.
Shameless plug.
You beat me to it.
Okay. Well, we can always come back to it, Darren. We can always come back to it. So I do that every Thursday, and it's a lot of fun. You only get so many people when you do it live. But it's, there are people who will watch later, and that's what I appreciate. And it's just a good way to connect with and build community. And that's kind of the goal of what I want to be as an artist, is to build that community, to have a group of people who, if they want to be my musical ride or dies, great. But it's developing that and rewarding the people who are interested in my music and trying to make it more accessible so that they can, because I'm not a big name person. I probably won't ever be. And I'm absolutely fine with that. But if someone resonates with my music and they're in Finland, for instance,
exactly, yeah,
or Australia, they can still see me do something live, even if it's online.
I love it. Yeah. And then actual outperforming shows. You've been doing some solo gigs, you said. So is this a new band for you? Are you, have you guys done some gigging, or is this?
We did, the only time that we have played live together was actually at the Irvington Battle of the Bands.
Okay.
And I submitted my material to them, which was recorded mostly, like I said, by me and my brother and Tim.
We're gonna find Tim's.
We're gonna find Tim's last name. We are. And so that got us into the Battle of the Bands, and then we practiced like crazy for it. Which
how long ago was this?
This was back in September.
Okay, so fairly
no
recently.
October. I'm sorry, that was October.
So fairly recently.
Yeah, fairly recently, and so there was an opportunity to play at the Melody, but if you're playing at the Melody, you have to play with a band. You can't do a solo gig. And the band and I have been meeting. At first it was every other week, just to kind of get back into the rhythm of things. And we thought, well, maybe we'll play during the summer. Play out during the summer. But then, that opportunity for the Melody arrived, and we're like, let's jump at this. Let's do it. And so we're going to be playing music from the first, second, and upcoming third album.
It doesn't exist yet.
That doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
But the thing about doing that, though, and why I'm doing that, is because the band will be on the third album.
Okay.
They will be so the band is called the Nomad Collective.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
Josh Gillespie and the Nomad Collective.
Love it.
And so the third album will be the first full band album that I've done. Now my drummer is appearing on the second album.
Okay.
I've known him for quite a while, and he just, I just knew it would be easy to work with him on this one. And it wasn't a slight to the other guys. It was more or less, it was mostly because what I'm working on the second album is still very much me and not necessarily something that I think would fit the band. The second album is going to sound entirely different from the first album.
Okay.
Which I'm very excited about.
Yeah. Well, now I'm excited. When do you anticipate that will be out?
Summer.
Summer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm done giving dates, so I'll give seasons. Because we thought we had something in mind, and it just timing. Honestly, there are a lot of projects going on at the engine room, which is where I record. And then, unfortunately, my producer actually has to do. He's also in the military. He has to do some duty for a month in Tennessee.
Okay.
So that takes him off the project for a while.
Okay.
But I will actually be releasing a single before he leaves. Well, not before he leaves. It'll be after he leaves, but he's finishing it up before he leaves. It's a song called "Piece of My Heart," and it fits probably more along the third album model in terms of music. But it's a fun little pop rock tune that's about unrequited love. And yeah, it's wrote it last year, and I'm excited to get that out. There's another song that I've been working on. It's actually it's not an acoustic cover, but it's a cover of Toad the Wet Sprocket's song "Fall Down" from their 1994 album Dulcinea. Which, if no one's heard Dulcinea, listen to Dulcinea. It is a magnificent album. And so I'm actually, I'm finishing up a cover of that. Just there are a few minor things that need to be fixed, and so I'm waiting on I was recording that with my cousin, so I'm waiting on him to get me the final version of that. But that song actually happens to feature not only the string player from Souvenirs of War in India Blue and Seasons. She also appears on Seasons, Joni Fuller, but also the former touring drummer for Toad the Wet Sprocket is on that track.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
He was the touring drummer at the time of the recording. I only recently found out during a Glenn Phillips live stream that he has since left the band to tour with a country act.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit disappointed about that, but
Interesting. Okay. All right. So let's touch just for a minute, because we've alluded to it a little bit, your podcast, Voices of Indie. Tell me what motivated you to start that, and just give a little background on that.
Sure.
You're doing an excellent job with it.
Thank you.
I love watching it.
It keeps me busy, but
busier.
Busier, yeah. No, I do love it. It's what started as a playlist on Spotify called Voices of Indie.
Okay.
Became the podcast.
Okay.
And I've been kind of pretty straightforward with it, that I started the podcast for selfish reasons. And that was to get me and hopefully my music in front of other musicians in Indianapolis.
Okay.
And I started off, my very first guest was an Americana singer by the name of T.A. Parker, a good friend of mine. And it was sort of supposed to be an offshoot of Two for Tuesdays.
Okay.
And so I would do it on Thursday. I would do it once a month on the first Thursday of the month.
Okay.
And I would feature a musician, a local musician, and they would play and I would play. And so if you go back and watch that very first Voices of Indie, which was recorded in my living room, you'll see that I play, but I have not played in one since, because I felt so self-conscious isn't the right, well, maybe self-conscious, but not because I played a song, but because that show really should have been about TA and not me. And I kind of horned myself in there by playing Remains of Time, into his bit. So I need to have TA on again. I've even said as much as like, dude, I feel bad now because I need to have you on again. just because I feel like I horned in on your episode. And he's like, "Oh, no, it's fine." I was like, "Well, it was the first one. I was still I was still feeling it out." And so that the original intention, that was the original intention. And I eventually saw it as a way just as to get to know the different artistic communities within Indianapolis, because I had moved from Fishers into downtown Indianapolis, and I wanted to connect somehow. And whether it was, well, and the only way that I really knew how to do it, because it wasn't like my music was taking off, and we were still sort of under, kind of quarantining kind of things. And it was things were, not entirely sure what was going on. It just wasn't easy to play out. So I wanted to give musicians and other artists a way to play out, but perform for the masses, because I had taken in a number of online live streams of bands and other artists, and I personally enjoyed it. In fact, you can still go back on YouTube and watch some of those performances of bands, doing those old quarantine performances.
Right, yeah.
And they're great. They're awkward now, but the performances are great.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of wanted to provide that for and for other people to get to know, the musicians and other things that are going on in Indianapolis. It's really taken on this, as I call it, season 2, which started in January. It's really taken on a music-heavy approach right now. It previously featured musical artists, theatrical artists, visual artists, so that people could get to know the different kind of artistic communities within Indianapolis. And that was always the intent. But I've really focused on music this time around. I went from being initially recording once a month to twice a month to 3 times a month to now 4 times a month.
So you're doing it every week.
I do it every week now.
And it airs Monday.
I record it on Tuesday. I stream it on Tuesday nights. I will stream it on the following Monday nights.
At 8 o'clock.
At 8 o'clock
Eastern time.
Yes. On youtube.com/@voicesofindie. And it's just like you, because we've had this discussion before, that now it's people contacting me being like, I don't have to do the work, the legwork.
Right.
They're coming to me now.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
Yeah, that's
It's a little bit overwhelming, because now I'm getting some people, like, I got a random text message the other night being like, "Hey, I want to be on Voices of Indie," and I'm like,
"Who is this?"
I did. I said, "Sorry, who is this?"
Yeah.
And they never responded.
Yeah. And you said you're booked out quite a ways, right?
I am booked into June.
Oh my God.
And I mean, honestly, July, August will be filling up here pretty soon too, just because I need to respond to some Instagram direct messages. My apologies if you also happen to listen to this podcast and you're like, "Josh, you haven't responded to me." One, thank you for listening to Darren's podcast. He's doing great work.
Thank you.
There needs to be more podcasts like what we're doing. But I will get back to you. I promise. I just don't know when, but I promise I'll get back to you.
Oh, and you, before we hit record, we talked about you had a podcast once before. Just touch on that a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
It's still available.
No, it is. It is. Actually, this is how, not this particular podcast, but I've been doing podcasting since 2007. And originally, I was doing political podcasts. And I started a political podcast with a website that I had launched in 2007, back when blogs were still a huge thing. But I was the first blog in Indiana that incorporated podcasting and other social media platforms into it. And I mean, it took off. That website took off. It even got recognized by the Washington Post.
Really?
And so I was heavily involved in political podcasting, and because of my work, I eventually had to give it up. But eventually, I started up again, and I would say that the one that's currently available is called The Political Nomad, and in many ways, The Political Nomad also helped shape my first album.
Oh, okay.
Because what I wanted to do with The Political Nomad was talk about, because I had gone through, like, my album is not my story, but it is my journey of a political divorce or a political deconstruction. But I wanted to get other people's takes. Like, I wanted to bring the humanity back to politics and to help people understand why they went from more about their political journey. So most of the time, it featured people who were who were in one party but switched at some point or another.
Okay.
And what that journey was like. And so I even created playlists for that. There's the Political Nomad playlist. And for the first season, each episode had its own playlist because it was, I called it the road trip playlist.
Okay.
And because if you're a nomad, you're journeying.
Right.
And so to me, it only made sense to have an associating playlist. So I would always talk to my guests afterwards and be like, and it was always part of the interview. It's like, what would be on your political playlist? Your road trip playlist. What are you listening to?
Nice.
And so I would turn that into a playlist that people could listen to. And so that's actually still out there.
Yeah.
The Political Nomad season 1 and 1 episode of season 2, and I never made another one.
You're too busy with the other things now.
Well, that's actually part of it. Yeah, I got overwhelmed with doing Voices of Indie.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, I find more joy in doing Voices of Indie than I did doing The Political Nomad. I mean, I still want to bring humanity to politics because it's just so dirty. But I don't know, I find more joy in talking about music and art and theater.
Yeah. I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Hey, we can wrap up here. You've been very kind with your time.
Thank you for having me on as a guest.
Absolutely. And we've touched on this a little bit, but what does the rest of 2023 look like for you?
So I will be wrapping up. Ghost Stories is the name of my second album.
Okay.
Again, summer. I could say a month, but if I did, it probably jinxes it.
Yeah.
So I'll say summer.
Okay.
It'll be coming out summer. It's an album that really kind of tackles faith and depression. I wrote it in. I wrote a good part of it in a dark spot, and in a dark spot that our family was in. Not just me, but a couple of my kids were also going through some mental challenges, and so having 3 people all at once going through something really kind of informs this album.
Okay.
And so that's what's coming up. Voices of Indie continues, and I hope to actually be back in the studio recording, hopefully, fingers crossed here, by the end of the year, working on album number 3 with the band.
Wow. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm having so much fun.
Yeah. You strike me as a guy that's got a lot of energy and a lot of creative thoughts going.
There is a lot going on up here. I will tell you that much. Hopefully it's for the good.
Yeah. Well, the results are good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now I'm really excited about. I mean, I'm excited about the second album. It's one of those albums where I'm like, I don't know who exactly the audience is, and it's my hope that the audience finds it. Like I said, it's going to sound completely different from the first album. Anthony, my producer, has said as much, just because his hands are going to be on. I'm working with a different producer than I did with the first time. And so I'm really excited. And Anthony's bringing so much energy and so much creativity to this album. And he's pushing me vocally in ways that I haven't been pushed before.
Okay.
Which is exciting.
Good.
So I'm excited with what could come of this. And then the third album will, like I said, that will hit that up in hopefully by the end of the year.
Okay.
And that is probably more of a sister album to the first album than the second one is to the first album.
Okay.
The second one is really truly its own animal.
Yeah.
But it's the part one of a sequel.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it won't be a trilogy. It'll just be a sequel.
Okay.
Okay. But so it's like the odd albums will go together, the even albums will go together.
Makes sense.
I guess.
Yeah, now there's math involved.
Right?
Yeah.
So term papers, random things about supercontinents and math. Wow, I really know how to pull in the listener.
Yeah, you do. You do. Oh, it made me go to Google, so that was a good.
There we go.
Yeah.
Learning something new every day.
Yeah. So finally, ways that, and we've touched on some of this already, but ways that fans can connect with you, they can find you.
Yeah. JoshGillespie.com, GILLESPIE. That is my website. But if you really want to find out what's going on with Ghost Stories and future albums, where a lot of the creativity is taking place, it's taking place on Patreon. And that's at patreon.com/Josh Gillespie Music.
Okay.
And for as little as $5 a month, people can get behind the scenes footage, podcasts. I do a podcast just for patrons, and right now that's been going through each of the songs on the album, kind of giving a behind the music commentary.
Even more stuff to do.
Exactly. And I do a once a month virtual house show for patrons. So and I'm constantly looking to ways to improve the patron experience. So that's, if anybody's interested, check me out there, patreon.com/Josh Gillespie Music. And like you said, I'm all over the socials. It's Josh Gillespie Music on Instagram and Facebook.
With good content, I would add.
Thank you.
The content's great.
Thank you. It's hard. Admittedly, there are some people out there putting out some even better content than me. Some just tremendous content. And then it's Josh Gillespie on YouTube.
Okay, excellent. Well, I encourage everybody listening to go check out all those sites. Go check out Bandcamp.
Check out Bandcamp, joshgillespie.bandcamp.com.
Buy the record, and buy the second and the third one when they come out. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Darren.
Well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
It's great sitting down with you, and I wish you all the best for 2023.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon.
All right, thank you.